Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I echo the ranking member's call to bring Secretary Rubio before this committee. Every one of us should have the chance to go over the list of USAID programs with Secretary Rubio. I am extremely concerned about the upheaval and devastation being wrought by this administration's disastrous and systemic dismantling of foreign policy and foreign assistance apparatus. And I'm further concerned by the long-term impacts, not least of all to the lives and livelihoods of those around the world, but also the trust and commitments that this administration has broken that cannot be repaired so easily, even if the folks in charge did an about-face today. Last year, then Dept Sec of State Kurt Campbell met with this committee and emphasized the strategy of invest, align, compete in response to the PRC's growing geopolitical influence in the Indo-Pacific. Secretary Rubio highlighted his own vision of making us safer, stronger, and more prosperous, but he's currently failing at that mark as he cedes ground to the PRC. The PRC is undercutting our soft power, and is now pursuing an agenda that is opaque, illegal, if you ask me, and fails to uphold our commitment contracts throughout the process. The Trump administration is undercutting our soft power. Look at our farmers in the Midwest. I am especially concerned with the cuts to USAID. Over the last 4 fiscal years, USDA purchased food commodities to distribute via USAID from farmers in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Missouri, Florida. In Iowa, USAID accounted for $64 million in funds that were bought from Iowa farmers. In Indiana, $4 million. Nebraska, we bought $102 million worth of agricultural goods for USAID. In Missouri, it was $79 million. Florida, $99 million. Wisconsin, $230 million. These programs now are on hold, and our farmers are going to suffer as a result of ending the USAID programs. Mr. Rigas, you worked at the firm that advises clients how to navigate federal contracting, and I'm hearing from organizations in Illinois and around the country that are still owed tens of millions of dollars in reimbursement for work done in December and January. They have not been paid. They don't know when they will receive the money they are owed, and we're getting to the point where they may be owed interest on their outstanding money as well. Some of these American-founded and run organizations are exploring bankruptcy as something they may have to consider. They've already laid off hundreds of staff, by the way, and that doesn't sound like prosperity to me. Some of them report that they have been told by USAID that reimbursements for work done in December and January will only be provided for expenses that this administration deems legitimate or that they would have approved, even though these were contracts from the last administration for work done during the last administration. Mr. Rigas, who was the president back in December through January of 20? January 20th?
Who was the president in December of
2024 through January 20 of 2025?
President Joe Biden.
Putting your contracting advisor hat back on, would you have advised anyone in December to anticipate that the government might not reimburse for work appropriately directed under that administration?
I think the federal contracting law is pretty clear. So if a contractor has provided goods or services, they're going to be paid. I don't see how that wouldn't happen.
Okay, but they haven't been paid yet for December or January. That's a problem for these companies that are now facing bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost taxpayers more money if we have to pay those contracts with interest.
Yeah.
If confirmed, you will be overseeing the Office of Foreign Assistance, where many of these illegal and unprecedented directives have originated. Can you commit to me that if you're confirmed, Mr. Rigas, you will swiftly move to correct this issue and at a bare minimum reimburse organizations for the work that they did before the stop work order?
Of course, Senator, if confirmed, absolutely. I would go in, make sure, see what kind of a disconnect has occurred or if there's been a miscommunication. But certainly to me, it would seem anyone that has a contract to provide goods and services to the United States government and has rendered those goods and services to the United States government should be paid for them and will be paid.
Good. That's good to hear. Thank you. I'm not even talking about what has happened under this funding freeze, which I also find egregious. I'm just talking about work that was done prior to that freeze. And so thank you for that commitment. Moving on to our strength, one area where I thought we might have continuity of purpose, and in our discussion we talked about UXO clearance. With this administration's stop work order and foreign assistance freeze, UXO clearance work funded by the U.S. and implemented by partners on the ground was stopped. In some countries like Vietnam, those war legacies issues are the bedrock of our relationship that we have cultivated over decades. In others, they are one of the few connective tissues we have. And you know what happened when we did the stop work? Immediately, PRC came in and gave a $4.4 million contract to take over the UXO work that we were funding, that we established on the ground. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record Radio Free Asia article talking about the PRC stepping in.
It will be included, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think it looks good. Do you think that looks good, to have the PRC stepping in on this work?
I'm not familiar with that particular case, but I think we've talked at this hearing about our need to compete and confront where China is gaining around the world at the expense of U.S. interests. So to the extent, it would certainly be a priority of mine. I know it's a priority of the president's to push back on the gains that China has made, certainly in the Western Hemisphere and everywhere else where U.S. interests are at stake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Landau.